Hi, everyone. This is Alexander Lim, and welcome to AuthorStory, where every episode we speak to various authors on various topics of interest. For this episode, I'm interviewing Kate Lund, author of the book Bounce: Help Your Child Build Resilience and Thrive in School, Sports, and Life. And if any of you guys are interested, feel free to go right ahead and to the link in the description below the video and check out or get a copy of her book. So, Kate, welcome to AuthorStory. Thanks for being our guest.
Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Cool. So, Kate, for starters, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What's your author story?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm a clinical psychologist. I am a mom,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a university instructor. So I kind of split my time in those domains, and I'm also, of course, an author.
Mm-hmm.
And so I like to sort of mix and match on the professional front, all sort of within this broader area of resilience.
Right.
Um, yeah,
Okay, cool. So I guess you've got kids. So I'm sure that you're being a mom, you're particularly concerned with regards to, your kids' development and resiliency.
absolutely. I very much am. And really, I wrote this book as a psychologist
Mm-hmm.
and as a mom,
Mm-hmm.
and really kind of brought my thoughts together on the topic of resilience from those perspectives, as well as the perspective of myself as a child with some medical challenges,
Mm-hmm.
which caused me to need to be resilient from an early point. So the book really brings together my perspectives on resilience from those three angles.
Okay, right. So all right, that's interesting because it's sort of like three different cuts on the same topic, on the same subject, and of course, a lot more gets discovered and a lot more gets covered then.
Right. Yeah. And that was really my intention, to sort of bring together the different angles of sort of how we can look at resilience, as professionals, as parents, and also as adults who at one point had to develop resilience for various reasons. Because as we know, we all have challenges.
Right.
Mine came early in the form of medical challenges with a
Mm-hmm.
condition called hydrocephalus.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but as we know, challenges can emerge in any way, shape, or form,
Right.
and kids today face so many
Right.
challenges, whether in school, in social situations,
Mm-hmm.
on the sports, field,
Mm-hmm.
so many.
Right. Okay. So, what made you decide to write this book, Kate? Was there like an aha moment when you realized, I should write this thing? Or was it more like a growing realization as time went by?
Alex, I think it was a growing realization as time went by.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is as a result of my own early experiences, I've had this long-term interest in resilience and
Mm-hmm.
what really is that and how does one develop it? And then during the course of my training as a clinical psychologist,
Mm-hmm.
of course, I was exposed to, many different situations with kids and folks across the lifespan, really,
Mm-hmm.
where resilience was, essential in
Mm-hmm.
helping them to move forward. Um, and one of my earlier training experiences was at Shriners Burn Hospital in Boston,
Mm-hmm.
where kids were coming in with pretty catastrophic burn injuries,
Mm-hmm.
and the need for those children to be resilient, both in the immediate time frame after their injuries and longer term for years and years, really for the rest of their lives, was so evident. So my interest in the area of resilience really strengthened at that point and has just, gone on for the past 15 years. So, about a year ago, I was like, okay, it's time to pull these pieces together and write this book. And of course, my own experiences as a mom contributed as well,
Mm-hmm.
watching my kids go through, the normative sort of trials and tribulations of life as elementary school kids.
Right. Okay, got that. So, why is where children are concerned, particularly with child development, why is resiliency so important?
Well, it's so important for so many reasons, but really the primary reason is, kids are going to face challenges
Hmm.
in whatever form they present themselves in. Challenges everywhere. And so that ability to get back up after they've been knocked down, after they've faced an obstacle,
Yeah.
is so, so important. Because if they're not able to do that, they'll get stuck, and aspects of their potential will never be realized. So resilience is really important in sort of helping kids to move past obstacles, to see what's possible for them, and to realize their potential.
Okay, and I mean, let's face it, not all kids are resilient. I mean, there's some kids that get stuck in a rut. There's, well, other kids caught in the same situation. They just seem to just move on, breeze past it.
Exactly. And that's really true. It's kind of what we know is that some kids are inherently more resilient than others,
Mm,
from the get-go.
mm,
And some just really aren't as resilient from the get-go and
mm,
might have more of a sort of glass half empty perspective,
mm,
and that sort of thing. And so for those kids, it's really, really important to help them shift that perspective to more of an optimistic perspective, to really work on developing the pillars of resilience that I outline in my book
right.
from the get-go. And even those kids who are more resilient from the beginning
Hmm.
can benefit
Hmm.
from bolstering their existing resilience.
Right. Okay. So you're a clinical psychologist, right?
Hmm.
Okay, so let me just get
Yes.
a little bit into a little bit into some scientific aspects, some scientific debate here. Nature versus nurture. How much of resiliency would you say is natural, and how much of it is due to environment?
Right. And it really depends. I
Hmm.
don't believe there's a one size fits all on that.
All right.
Um, and I think it goes back to the idea that, in terms of nature, some kids are just born more resilient than others.
Hmm.
Um, and some kids are able to develop resilience over time as a result of environmental experiences.
Hmm.
Um, you know, because I'm thinking about my own story, for example,
Hmm.
I really had to overcome some of these medical challenges early on.
Hmm.
Had that not been the case,
Hmm.
perhaps other challenges would have presented themselves.
Right.
Um, so it's really a open question that we need to explore further.
Hmm.
And I don't think there's a one size fits all. I think it
Hmm.
depends on the situation, depends on the child,
Hmm.
depends on that environment, right?
Right.
Because environments are so different for kids. Nobody is really coming from the same environment.
True.
Uh, and one other thing to add is that, you know, as far as the nature piece goes, we can have two kids, twins even,
Hmm.
in the same environment
Hmm.
who are very different in relation to where they fall on the continuum of being resilient or not.
Mm. Okay. Okay, got that. But I mean, like, say we've got a kid who's naturally, let's say, not that resilient. Is it possible that that kid can become more resilient through, let's say, environment, encouragement, and things like those?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mm.
We can really help children to develop the core elements of resilience by helping them to, for example, learn to tolerate their frustrations and manage emotions.
Mm.
Because that child who is not able to do that is really going to get stuck as they try to move past obstacles.
Mm.
I mean, we can imagine that child who's frustrated about something in the classroom, right?
Right, right.
Maybe it's a a math problem that's just really stumping them, or
Right.
it's a presentation they're trying to give and their mind has gone blank.
Right.
And if emotions start to spin out of control and, the child becomes super frustrated about it, it's likely that they're going to shut down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so helping those kids to learn to tolerate that frustration, manage those emotions through, any range of mindfulness-based techniques that we can teach them, helping them to internalize that everybody learns at a different pace and in different ways, and it's okay to struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and really helping them to separate their performance in the classroom and their outcome from how they ultimately feel about themselves,
Mm-hmm.
is something that we can really do to help that child who's less resilient from the get-go become more resilient. And we can do other things too. We can help them to really learn the tools for navigating friendships and social pressures.
Mm-hmm.
Because those are other things, those can bog kids down as well,
Yeah.
and really get them off track. And the list goes on. There, the pillars of the resilient child outlined in the book. We can really teach them all of those skills.
Okay, cool. So can you just tell us a little bit about these pillars in the book? What are these pillars?
Sure, absolutely. So, I came up with this model of the pillars of the resilient child through the course of, my own experience as a child, my training as a clinical psychologist, and all of the aspects of resilience that I was exposed to there,
Mm-hmm.
the ongoing work that I continue to do with kids in various domains, as well as observing the challenges and triumphs really of my own kids. So came up with this 7-pillar model. And the pillars are, this ability to tolerate frustration and manage
Mm-hmm.
emotions,
Mm-hmm.
navigate friendships and social pressures, sustain focus and attention, develop courage, build motivation, find confidence, and create optimism. And now
Mm-hmm.
those are really the pillars of resilience, as they're defined in this particular model based on all of the variables I mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
And the
so
belief is that building these skills, you know, in kids will really help them to become more resilient.
right. Okay, okay. So, well, first off, like you said, this model came about essentially from your experiences and analysis of what it takes to become a resilient child.
Yes,
Mm,
exactly.
okay.
Exactly.
And I mean, these are quite a few things. Like, I mean, I certainly didn't think of them these as such in the first place. Like navigating friendships and social pressures, building motivation. I mean, I kind of like for me, it's like I kind of knew it before, but seeing it in black and white, it's like, yeah, that's right. Interesting.
Right. Yeah. And, resilience is defined in various ways, but really this book is written from the perspective of human experience.
Hmm.
And so I'm really bringing together my own experience early on, you
Hmm.
know, the experiences, the human experiences that I observed during the course of my training and that I continue to observe daily in my work as a psychologist, and also those of my kids. So these are really the core elements of resilience that were boiled down in my analysis of, okay, I want to write this book, and what is it really? What's
Hmm.
really at the heart of resilience? And
Right.
so that's how this model came about.
Hmm.
And of course, the um, research on resilience is plentiful,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
that's all sort of implicit in this presentation for sure.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, it's all well and good to say things like, navigating friendships and social pressures, building motivation, but can you give us an example from at least one of these pillars about, a real world example of how this sort of thing can work?
Sure, absolutely. So let's look at navigating friendship and social pressure, for
Okay.
example.
Okay.
And so this pillar is so important because we know, how much social pressure kids face today.
Yeah.
Um, and kids really need to know how to be a friend. And at the same time, they need to know how to stand up for themselves and their
Hmm.
beliefs
Hmm.
when friendships go off track.
Hmm.
Um, so, for example, two kids are friends in perhaps late elementary school, and one wants to go off and do something that the other knows isn't right
Hmm.
or really could get us in big trouble.
Right. Right.
And, you know, what's going to happen there? Is the friendship going to implode? Is the one kid going to get pulled off track?
Right.
So we really need to help children to navigate those types of situations. And the idea is that we can teach them the skills inherent in emotional intelligence as a big part of this process.
Hmm.
And so by that, I mean, we can help them to become more self aware.
Hmm.
Um, we can help them to understand what they believe is right and where their values stand.
Right.
Um, we can help them to accept and understand individual difference among peers. And this is so important and at the core here because not everybody's going to behave in the same way.
True.
And
True.
that whole piece of individual difference really then applies as well to the whole idea when kids are different or they're standing out in some way because of a learning challenge or an
Right.
illness or physical disability. That is such an important skill to be able to accept and understand that individual difference. Um, and so this strong social emotional foundation is really going to help on both sides of that friendship equation.
Hmm.
Um, it's going to help the kids who are being, um, you know, pulled down the wrong path or in some cases bullied to understand and appreciate the individual differences in themselves and their peers in a way that makes them um, more tolerant and accepting of the other person, but also more tolerant and accepting of what they want and where they want to go.
Right.
Um, and it also helps kids to get in touch with their own strengths and use them to their advantage to move beyond the pressures that will emerge in, friendship situations,
Hmm.
such that they won't get pulled off track or they're better able to manage um, the potential bullying situations that come up.
Right.
Um, and it's not an easy process. It takes time
Hmm.
and it takes a lot of attention.
Hmm.
Um, but it's a process that's really important to start early on.
Oh yeah, definitely. The sooner kids can, in my opinion, the sooner kids can get resilient, the sooner they can, they have the confidence to think for themselves, yeah, regardless of who comes up or like a bully, as you said, or things like that.
Exactly, exactly. And resilience, exactly. It sort of goes both ways. We want to instill confidence to become, help a child become resilient. But as they're more resilient, they become more confident. And this really applies, sort of both sides of that coin apply to all of the pillars that we outline in the book.
Mm. Okay, okay. So, so we've been talking about the child actually so far. I mean, resiliency of the child. What can, say, a parent or a teacher or some authority figure whom the child interacts with, what can they do to create this environment where they can create resiliency within a child?
Right. So, this book is written with parents and teachers and coaches in mind, really.
Mm.
And so each chapter outlines these big ideas about each pillar of resilience.
Mhm.
And the chapters all end with action steps
Mm-hmm.
or bullet points
Right.
that parents and teachers and coaches can hone in on um, in terms of how they can start the process of actually fostering and building these pillars of resilience into the kids that they work with, either in the classroom, on the playing field, or their own kids for that
Mm-hmm.
matter.
All right.
Um, for example, um, in terms of tolerating frustration and managing emotion,
Mm-hmm.
in the classroom, teachers can really help kids to access the right state of mind,
Mm-hmm.
a positive, focused state of mind, which is really necessary to succeed
Mm-hmm.
in any sort of challenging task, any task in the classroom.
All right.
Um, they can integrate strategies to help kids to regulate their emotions,
Mm-hmm.
which is going to then help them to tolerate frustration. And there are many different trainings out there on sort of mindfulness-based techniques that can help teachers in that domain,
Mm-hmm.
or they can consult with somebody to come in and help their classroom learn those skills. Um, you know, Teachers can really be on the front lines of helping kids to build belief in themselves and their abilities,
Mm-hmm.
particularly when they hit a challenge.
All right.
Um, and one more big thing in the classroom is for teachers to really be in touch with each child's learning styles
Mm-hmm.
and really be aware of how that child learns best and use that in tailoring their teaching strategies accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now with regards to learning styles, this may be a bit of a sidebar, but with regards to learning styles, what are the different kind of learning styles that you've seen children use?
Well, some children might learn best by hearing instructions or, you know, taking in information auditorily.
Mm-hmm.
That might be the child who has a reading challenge or might even have, mild dyslexia, something on that line,
Mm-hmm.
along those lines.
All right.
They might do better, listening to books in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
They might really need to really hear the instructions more than once in case they've missed it the first time.
Right.
So there's that type of learning style. Some kids are the opposite. They
Mm-hmm.
learn best by seeing or doing, that kinesthetic learning style.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, and some kids, there might be a combination of both.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and oftentimes it might not be as clear from the get-go.
Right.
So the teacher really needs to hone in on what's making a certain kid tick,
Mm-hmm.
and how can they help to foster the process of learning and the development of resilience in the classroom for that individual child.
Right. Right. And how about parents? How can parents help out their child build resiliency?
Right. And so really in a lot of the same ways that we just outlined for teachers, however, without that emphasis obviously on the classroom.
Right.
But the biggest thing that parents can do in terms of helping their child build resilience is to really be in touch with their child's strengths and their aptitudes
Mm.
and help them to find ways to focus on those strengths and aptitudes in their daily lives. So,
Mm-hmm.
in other words, parents can really help kids to build resilience in terms of this first pillar,
Mm-hmm.
tolerating frustration, managing emotion. It really applies across the pillars by helping them to hone in on their strengths and use those strengths in moving forward and to their advantage. And what are the child's passions? And how can I, as a parent, help to foster my child's passions and help them really lock in on, you know, where their potential is and what they're good at?
Mm. Okay. Okay. Got that. Cool. So, Kate, I'm sure there are a lot of books out there in parenting, raising children, and things like that. So, what is it about Bounds that is makes it that differentiates it from all the other books in this field?
Right. That's a really great question, Alex. And so my intention with Bounce was to really write it through a humanistic lens.
Hmm.
So everything that's in Bounce is really sort of illustrated and defined through human experience. Um, Obviously, the research on resilient is implicit within the pages as well, but really, I wanted this to be an accessible um, read for parents, teachers, and coaches. Wanted them to be able to pick it up, kind of take a look at resilience from a bit of a different angle,
Hmm.
get some concrete action steps at the end of each chapter,
Hmm.
and such that it would be useful for them in the moment. Um, but the biggest thing that differentiates it is the element of human experience
Hmm.
that we bring in through uh, real life composite stories
Hmm.
of what some kids have really experienced and how they've overcome challenges to become more resilient. And then incorporating my own story into the book as well differentiates it um, as a book that really accentuates the human experience.
All right, cool. I got that. Okay, Kate, so let's say you have a parent who is concerned about the way his or her child seems to be developing. May or may not have temper tantrums, but definitely insecure, anxious, and so on. And this child is, there's nothing wrong with this child physically or mentally. Now, if you had only time to tell that parent one thing about to increase that child's resiliency, what would be that one thing you'd say?
That's a really, really good question. And I think really at the core, Alex, of that question,
Hmm.
or the how I would answer that question would be to suggest to that parent to really um, develop their relationship with their child.
Mm-hmm.
Get to know that child even better than they already know them.
Mm-hmm.
What makes them tick? What are their strengths? How can we use those strengths to foster their resilience and help them move forward? Because oftentimes, you know, when these things are happening, it's a result of you know misunderstandings
Mm-hmm.
and not really understanding what's at the core of how this child is operating. So I would say focus on the relationship
Mm-hmm.
um, with the child.
All right. Well, that's great advice, and actually, it's great words of wisdom right there. So, in closing, then, wish we could talk longer, Kate. You know, we're kind of short in time. So, in closing, then, the book is Bounds: Help Your Child Build Resilience and Thrive in School, Sports, and Life. The author is our guest, Kate Lund, and you can find her book on Amazon. You know, Kate, again, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for being an author story. It was very insightful having you here with us today.
Well, thank you so much, Alex, for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Cool. You're welcome. So everyone, I invite you to go ahead and check out Bounce, which you can do so right now in the description below. And while you're at it, feel free to subscribe to our channel if you want to do so. So long for now, everyone. I'll be back on Author Story weekly interviews with another inspiring author.